The silence in space was broken by screaming metal and dying ships. Captain Kang Ho stood on the bridge of the UES Iron Will, watching the final moments of humanity's greatest fleet burn against the black void. His hands gripped the command rail, so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "Sir, we're getting the last transmission from Admiral Park Yuna," said Communications Officer Lee Su, her voice barely above a whisper. The young woman's face was pale as she listened to her headset. "She's ordering all remaining ships to fall back to the outer colonies." Kang Ho closed his eyes for a moment. Park Yuna had been his mentor at the Naval Academy. She taught him that a captain's first duty was to his crew, and his second was to humanity itself. Now she was about to die with her ship, and there was nothing he could do to save her. The main screen flickered to life, showing the Admiral's scarred face. Behind her, sparks flew from damaged consoles while crew members ran back and forth trying to save their dying ship. "This is Admiral Park Yuna of the Terran Federation Navy," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I am ordering all surviving vessels to retreat immediately. The war is over. We have lost." "Admiral?" Lee Su called out, but the transmission was already breaking up. Static filled the screen as the Admiral's flagship, the mighty dreadnought Defiance, exploded in a ball of white fire. 200 years of human engineering and the lives of 3,000 brave souls vanished in an instant. Kang Ho felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Defiance had been the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. If it could be destroyed so easily, what chance did his small frigate have? The Iron Will was a good ship, but she was built for patrol duty and escort missions, not fleet battles against the monsters that had just killed the Admiral. "Captain," said Navigator Shin Jun from his station, "long-range sensors are picking up the Valkyrie main fleet. They'll be here in 6 hours." Kang Ho looked at the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen like a disease spreading across healthy tissue. Each dot represented a Valkyrie warship, and there were so many that the computer had stopped counting. At 200. Leading them was a massive signature that could only be one ship, the Void Render. Commanded by War Master Theckelon himself, the Valkyrie had appeared in Human Space 3 years ago like a nightmare made real. Their ships were massive things that looked more like floating cities than warships. Each one was covered in weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop anything humans threw at them. They had swept through the galaxy, crushing every civilization they found. Now it was humanity's turn to die. "Sir, we're receiving general evacuation orders," Lee Su reported. "All civilian and military vessels are ordered to retreat to the Tau Ceti system. The Valkyrie are offering terms for surrender." Engineer Choi Min looked up from his console. The older man had been with the ship since it was launched 5 years ago. "Terms?" he said with disgust. "You mean slavery. I've seen the reports from the worlds they've conquered. They don't let anyone live free." Kang Ho had seen those reports too. The Valkyrie didn't just conquer worlds, they broke them. They turned entire populations into workers for their war machine. Children were taken from their families and trained to serve the Dominion. Adults who resisted were killed as examples. Those who submitted lived, but they stopped being human in any way that mattered. "Captain," said Weapons Officer Kim Tae, "what are your orders?" Kim Tae was young, barely 25, but she was the best gunner Kang Ho had ever served with. She could hit targets that the computer said were impossible to reach. Right now, she was looking at him with the same trust that his entire crew had shown for 3 years. They believed he would find a way to save them. The problem was that there was no way to save them. The Iron Will had 47 people on board. The Valkyrie fleet had probably 500,000. His ship had basic weapons and shields. Their ships could destroy planets. It should have been an easy choice: run away and live to fight another day. That's what any smart captain would do. But Kang Ho thought about Admiral Park Yuna's last words. "The war is over. We have lost." He thought about all the worlds that had already fallen, all the people who were now slaves or dead. He thought about Earth, where his parents still lived in the house where he grew up. Would they surrender too? Would they bow down to these alien monsters and give up everything that made them human? "Sir?" Kim Tae asked again, medical officer. Yuna spoke from the back of the bridge. Captain, I've been monitoring the medical reports from the refugee ships. The Valkyrie don't just enslave people, they do things to them. Change them, make them into something that isn't human anymore. That decided it for Kang Ho. He turned to face his crew, looking each one of them in the eye. Li Su at communications. Still young enough to believe the universe was fair. Shin Jun at navigation, who had 3 children waiting for him at home. Choi Min at engineering, who kept the ship running through pure stubbornness and skill. Kim Tae at weapons, who had never backed down from a fight in her life. Yun Na at medical, who had joined the military to save lives. I know what the smart thing to do is, Kang Ho said. We should run, we should live to fight another day. But there won't be another day if we run now. The Valkyrie will hunt us down eventually, and when they catch us, we'll be alone. He walked to the center of the bridge where the main tactical display showed their small ship surrounded by the approaching enemy fleet. But if we fight now, if we make them pay for every inch they take, maybe someone will notice. Maybe someone will remember that humans don't give up without a fight. Captain, Choi Min said quietly, we're just one ship. We can't stop them. No, Kang Ho agreed. We can't stop them. But we can hurt them. We can show them that humans won't go quietly into the dark. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to inspire someone else to keep fighting. He looked around the bridge one more time. I won't order any of you to stay. Anyone who wants to. Take a shuttle and try to reach the evacuation fleet can do so now. No one will think less of you. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Kim Tae spoke. Where you go, we go, Captain. One by one, the rest of the crew nodded their agreement. Even young Li Su, who had everything to live for, straightened her shoulders and turned back to her console. All right then, Kang Ho said, settling into his command chair. Li Su, cut the transmission from Fleet Command. I don't want to hear any more surrender orders. Choi Min, bring all systems to full power. Kim Tae, load everything we have and prepare for combat. Shin Jun, plot a course for the Valkyrie fleet. Sir, Shin Jun said, his voice shaking slightly. Are you sure about this? Kang Ho smiled for the first time in days. No, I'm not sure about anything, but I'm sure we're not going to surrender. The Iron Will turned away from the retreating human ships and began accelerating toward the approaching Valkyrie fleet. Behind them, the last remnants of humanity's navy fled into the darkness. Ahead of them, 200 alien warships waited like hungry wolves. In 6 hours, they would meet. And the galaxy would learn what it meant to fight a human who refused to give up. 4 hours passed like minutes. The Iron Will cut through space toward the Valkyrie fleet, her engines pushed to maximum power. On the bridge, the crew worked in tense silence. Each person focused on their job, but aware that they were probably living their last few hours. Engineer Choi Min had rerouted power from everything that wasn't essential. Life support was running at minimum levels, artificial gravity was reduced to save energy, and even the lights were dimmed. Every spare bit of power went to weapons, shields, and engines. The ship hummed with barely contained energy. How are we looking, Choi? Captain Kang Ho asked. The older engineer wiped sweat from his forehead. We're running hot, Captain, but we'll hold together. I've got the fusion reactor tuned to give us 20% more power than normal. It'll burn out the containment systems eventually, but we should have enough time for what we need to do. And what exactly do we need to do? Asked Tactical Officer Oda from her station. Oda was new to the ship, transferred just 2 months ago from the heavy cruiser Seoul. She was good at her job, but she had never been in a real fight before. Kang Ho brought up the tactical display on the main screen. The Valkyrie fleet was spread out in a standard attack formation, with the smaller ships in front and the massive dreadnoughts behind them. At the center of it all was the Void Render, a ship so large it had its own gravity field. We can't fight them head-on, Kang Ho explained. They'll blow us apart before we get within weapons range. But look at their formation. They're used to fighting other fleets, ships that stay far away and try to match them weapon for weapon. They're not expecting a single small ship to charge right at them. Navigator Shin Jun highlighted different parts of the enemy formation. If we come in fast and low, we can get between their big ships before they can react. Their heavy weapons won't be able to target us without hitting their own vessels. That's insane, Oda said. We'll be surrounded by enemies. Exactly, said Weapons Officer Kim Tae with a grin. They'll be so busy trying not to shoot each other that they won't be able to coordinate their fire. We'll have maybe 10 minutes of chaos before they figure out how to deal with us. Medical Officer Yoon. Na spoke up from her station. I've prepared the medical bay for combat casualties. We have enough supplies to treat major injuries for about 6 crew members after that. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Communications Officer Lee Soo looked up from her console. Captain, I'm monitoring Valkyrie communications. Their commander is sending orders to prepare for another easy surrender. They think we're just another human ship running away. Good, Kang-ho said. Let them think that right up until we start shooting. The Iron Will was still 3 hours away from the enemy fleet, but already the Valkyrie ships looked huge on the long-range sensors. The smallest of their vessels was twice the size of the Iron Will, and their dreadnoughts were so massive they looked like small moons. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy an entire human colony. Sir, Oda said, studying her tactical readouts, I'm analyzing their ship designs. The Valkyrie build everything big and heavily armored, but that makes them slow? If we can get close enough, we might be able to outmaneuver them. What about their weapons? Kim Tae asked. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and some kind of energy beam that can cut through our strongest armor like paper. The good news is that most of their weapons are designed for long-range combat. Up close, they'll have trouble tracking a small, fast target, Kang-ho nodded. That's our advantage. We're small, we're fast, and we're too crazy for them to predict. Shin-jun, I want you to plot a course that takes us right through the middle of their formation. Don't worry about avoiding. Their ships worry about getting us close enough to hurt them. The next 2 hours crawled by. The crew double-checked every system, ran diagnostics on all the weapons, and prepared for the fight of their lives. Choi Min crawled through maintenance tunnels, making last-minute adjustments to the ship's systems. Yuna prepared medical supplies and set up emergency treatment areas throughout the ship. Kim Tae and Oda worked together to target the most important enemy ships. 30 minutes until contact, Shin-jun announced. On the main screen, the Valkyrie fleet filled the view. Their ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports and armored plating. They moved in perfect formation like a school of metal, sharks swimming through space. At their head, the Void Render dominated everything around it. The massive ship was easily 10 kilometers long and bristled with more weapons than the entire human fleet had possessed. Sir, Lee Soo said, the Valkyrie are trying to contact us. They're demanding our surrender. Ignore them, Kang-ho ordered. We'll give them our answer soon enough. The Iron Will raced toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed. To anyone watching, it must have looked like a single small fish swimming toward a school of whales. The Valkyrie probably thought it was another ship trying to escape, not realizing it was actually attacking. 10 minutes to contact, Shin-jun reported. Kang-ho stood up from his command chair and walked to the center of the bridge. This is it, people. In 10 minutes, we're going to hit them harder than they've ever been hit before. We're going to show them that humans don't know how to quit. He looked at each member of his crew. I want everyone to remember why we're doing this. Not for glory, not for medals, but for every human who has ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. We're fighting for the children who deserve to grow up free, for the parents who want to protect their families, and for everyone who believes that some things are worth dying for. 5 minutes to contact. Shin-jun said that the Valkyrie fleet was now close enough to see individual weapon ports on their ships. Warning lights began flashing on the Iron Will's bridge as enemy targeting systems locked onto them. The Valkyrie had finally realized that the small human ship wasn't running away. Sir, they're powering up weapons, Oda reported. Let them, Kang-ho said. By the time they're ready to fire, we'll be right on top of them. Kim Tae, arm all weapons. Target their lead destroyers first, then work your way back to the big ships. Weapons armed and ready, Captain. 1 minute to contact. The Valkyrie fleet opened fire. Beams of energy and streams of plasma filled the space ahead of the Iron Will. The small ship twisted and turned, dancing between the deadly weapons like a leaf in a hurricane. Shinchin's piloting skills kept them alive as explosions lit up the darkness around them. "Now!" Kang Ho shouted. The Iron Will dove into the enemy formation like a hawk diving on prey. Kim Tae opened fire with everything they had: plasma cannons, missile tubes, and even the ship's small railgun. Their first target, a Valkyrie destroyer, took the full force of their attack and staggered under the impact. "Direct hit!" Kim Tae yelled. "Their shields are down?" The Iron Will raced past the damaged destroyer and dove toward the next ship in line. Around them, the Valkyrie fleet tried to react, but they were too big and too slow. Their own formation worked against them as they struggled not to hit their own ships while trying to target the small human vessel. For the first time in 3 years of war, human weapons were finding their mark against Valkyrie ships. The Iron Will was outnumbered 200 to 1, but for these few precious minutes, she was winning dot and in the command center of the Void Render. War Master Thekkalon watched in growing amazement as a single human ship tore through his fleet like it was made of paper. The Iron Will spun through the Valkyrie formation like a deadly dancer, her weapons firing continuously. Sparks flew from damaged Valkyrie ships as Kim Tae's precise targeting found weak spots in their armor. The bridge shook with each impact from enemy weapons, but Navigator Shin Jun kept them moving too fast for the larger ships to get a solid lock. "Hull breach on deck 3, shouted Engineer Choi Min over the noise of alarms. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we're venting atmosphere." Captain Kang Ho gripped his command chair as the ship rolled to avoid a massive energy beam from one of the Valkyrie cruisers. "How long can we keep this up?" "Not long," Choi Min replied honestly. "The reactor is running at dangerous levels, and we're taking damage faster than I can repair it. Maybe 20 more minutes before something critical fails." On the main screen, Tactical Officer Oda highlighted their targets. "We've damaged 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers. But Captain, they're starting to adapt. They're pulling their big ships back and sending the smaller ones after us." Kang Ho could see it happening. The Valkyrie formation was changing, creating a cage of smaller, faster ships around the Iron Will while the dreadnoughts moved to safer positions. They had learned from their initial surprise and were now treating the human ship as a real threat. "Sir," Communications Officer Lee Soo called out, "I'm getting a direct transmission from the Valkyrie flagship. It's their commander." "Put him on screen," Kang Ho ordered. The image that appeared made several crew members step back in shock. War Master Thekkalon was huge, easily 8 feet tall, with gray-blue skin and 4 arms. His face was angular and harsh, with black eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel grinding against metal. "Human." "Captain," Thekkalon said in accented but clear English, "you have fought bravely, but pointlessly. Your ship is damaged, your crew is dying, and you are surrounded. Surrender now, and I will allow your people to live as workers in the Dominion." Kang Ho stood up and faced the screen. Behind him, his crew continued their desperate work, but he could feel them listening. "War Master Thekkalon, I assume? You assume correctly. I offer you terms because you have shown courage. Few species fight this hard when facing certain death. But courage without wisdom is merely foolishness. You cannot win this battle." "Maybe not," Kang Ho agreed. "But we can make you pay for it." The War Master's black eyes seemed to flash with something that might have been respect. "You are willing to die for nothing?" "Not for nothing," Kang Ho said. "For freedom, for the right to live as we choose. For the chance that someone, somewhere, will see what we did here and decide to keep fighting instead of giving up." Around them, the battle continued. The Iron Will was now surrounded by a dozen Valkyrie ships, all firing at once. The ship's shields flared and sparked under the constant bombardment. Warning lights flashed red throughout the bridge. "Your shields are failing," Thekkalon observed. "Your weapons are nearly depleted. What do you hope to accomplish by continuing? This futile resistance?" Medical Officer Yun Na looked up from her console. Captain, I'm reading massive casualties on the Valkyrie ships we've hit. Their life support systems are different from ours. Our weapons are affecting them in ways they didn't expect. Kang Ho smiled grimly. You hear that, War Master? We're full of surprises. Indeed you are, the Kalan replied. But surprises will not save you? I'm bringing my flagship into range. The Void Render carries weapons that can destroy your vessel with a single shot. This is your last chance to surrender. The transmission ended, and the massive bulk of the Void Render began moving toward them. The ship was so large it blocked out the stars behind it. Weapons ports along its hull began glowing with deadly energy. Sir, Shinjun said, his voice tight with stress, they're right. We can't survive a direct hit from that thing. Kang Ho looked around his bridge. Half the consoles were sparking or dark. Smoke filled the air, and he could hear damage reports coming in from all over the ship. Choi Min was working frantically to keep the engines running while Yun Na had abandoned her medical station to help fight fires in the corridor outside. How many crew do we have left? He asked. 32 able to fight, Oda reported. 15 wounded but stable. We lost. 3 in the hull breach on deck 3. 3 good people dead. 3 families who would never see their loved ones again. Kang Ho felt the weight of their sacrifice, but he also felt something else. Pride. His crew had fought like heroes against impossible odds. They had proven that humans wouldn't go quietly into the dark. Sir, Kim Tae said, I've got an idea. It's crazy, but it might work. I'm listening. The Void Render is huge, right? That means it has massive shield generators to protect something that big. But shields work both ways. They keep energy out and they keep energy in. If we could get inside their shield perimeter ... we could damage them from the inside, Oda finished. But how do we get through their shields? Kim Tae grinned and, for a moment, she looked like a child planning mischief instead of a weapons officer planning an attack. We ram them. The bridge went quiet except for the sound of alarms and distant explosions. Everyone stared at Kim Tae as if she had suggested. They sprout wings and fly home. That's suicide, Shinjun said. We're already committing suicide, Kim Tae pointed out. This way we take them with us. Kang Ho considered the idea. The Iron Will was tough for a ship her size, but ramming the Void Render would be like throwing a pebble at a mountain, unless... Troy, he called to the engineer. What would happen if we overloaded the fusion reactor right before impact? Choi Min's eyes went wide as he understood what the captain was suggesting. The explosion would be massive, sir. Big enough to crack the hull of even a ship that size. But it would definitely destroy us in the process. But would it stop them? Hard. To say depends on where we hit them and how much damage they've already taken, but it would hurt them badly. Kang Ho looked at his crew one more time. These brave people had followed him into certain death without complaint. They had fought harder than anyone had a right to expect. Now he was asking them to make the ultimate sacrifice. I won't order this, he said quietly. It has to be a choice. Each of you makes. Anyone who objects can take the escape pods now. Li Su spoke first. Sir, where would we go? The Valkyrie will just hunt us down eventually. At least this way, we go out fighting. One by one, the rest of the crew nodded their agreement. Even young Shin Jun, who had children waiting for him at home, straightened his shoulders and turned back to his navigation console. All right then, Kang Ho said. Shin Jun, plot a ramming course for the Void Render. Aim for their main reactor if you can identify it. Choi Min, start overloading the fusion reactor, but keep it stable until the last possible second. Kim Tae, save our remaining missiles for point-blank range. Sir, Li Su said, should I send a message to the fleet? Let them know what we're doing. Kang Ho thought about it for a moment. Yes, tell them that the crew of the Iron Will chose to fight rather than surrender. Tell them that humans don't know how to quit, and tell them... He paused, searching for the right words. Tell them that freedom is worth any price. The Iron will turn toward the approaching Void Render and began accelerating toward certain death. Behind them, the rest of the Valkyrie fleet followed. convinced they were watching the final moments of humanity's resistance. They had no idea that they were actually watching the moment when humanity chose to fight back. The Iron Will raced toward the Void Render like a bullet fired at a mountain. The massive Valkyrie flagship grew larger and larger on the main screen until it filled their entire view. Weapon ports along its hull glowed like angry eyes, preparing to destroy the small human ship that dared to challenge it. 2 minutes to impact, Navigator Shinjun announced, his voice steady despite the certain death racing toward them. Captain Kang Ho stood in the center of the bridge, watching his crew work with calm efficiency. They had accepted their fate, and were now focused only on making their sacrifice count. Engineer Choi Min worked at his console, carefully managing the fusion reactor overload that would turn their ship into a massive bomb. Weapons Officer Kim Tae prepared their last few missiles for a point-blank attack that might punch through the enemy's armor. Sir, Communications Officer Lee Soo said, my message got through to the evacuation fleet. Admiral Park second in command. Commander Beijin acknowledged receipt. He says ... He says they'll remember us. Kang Ho nodded, but his attention was focused on the tactical display. The Void Render was so large that its individual weapon systems were bigger than most human ships. Energy crackled along its hull as massive capacitors charged for a devastating attack. In 30 seconds, they would be close enough for the enemy to fire. Incoming transmission from War Master Thekalon, Lee Soo reported. Put him on. The alien. Commander's harsh face appeared on screen, but now there was something different in his black eyes. Was it respect? Curiosity? Human Captain, this is madness. You will accomplish nothing by destroying yourselves, won't we? Kang Ho replied, every species you've conquered gave up when the fighting got hard, but humans are different. We don't know how to quit, and we don't know how to surrender. Even if you kill every one of us, someone will remember that we fought back. Memory is worthless to the dead. Maybe, but it's everything to the living. Thekalon was quiet for a moment, studying the human captain. You truly believe your sacrifice will inspire others? I know it will. Because that's what humans do. We see someone fighting for what's right and we want to help. We see someone refusing to give up and it makes us stronger. You can kill us, War Master, but you can't kill the idea of freedom. 1 minute to impact, Shinjun called out. The Void Render's main guns were almost fully charged. Energy writhed along their barrels like caged lightning. When they fired, there would be nothing left of the Iron Will but scattered atoms. Sir, Medical Officer Yoon Na said from her station, I'm monitoring the crew's vital signs. Everyone is ready. Kang Ho felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought tears to his eyes. These people had chosen to die rather than live as slaves. They had chosen to fight rather than run. They were the best humanity had to offer, and he was honored to die beside them. Troy, how's that reactor looking? Containment is at critical levels, Captain. When we hit, the explosion will be equivalent to about 50 nuclear weapons. It should crack their hull wide open. 30 seconds to impact. On the screen, the Void Render's weapon ports flared to life. Massive energy beams lanced out, but the Iron Will was moving too fast and too erratically for the large weapons to track properly. The beams missed by mere meters, close enough for the crew to feel the heat through the ship's hull. Sir! Tactical Officer Oda shouted over the noise of alarms. I'm reading something strange, the Void Render's shields. They're fluctuating. Kang Ho looked at the tactical display. Oh, Da was right. The enemy's shields were flickering like a candle in the wind. What's causing it? I think it's us. Our fusion reactor is putting out massive amounts of energy as it overloads. It's interfering with their shield generators. Kim Tae looked up from her weapons console with sudden understanding. Captain, if their shields are down, our missiles will punch right through their armor, Kang Ho finished. Kim, prepare for a full-spread launch at 500 meters. Target their reactor core, 15 seconds to impact. The Iron Will dove toward the Void Render's hull like a hawk stooping on prey. The massive enemy ship filled their view completely, a landscape of metal and weapons stretching in all directions. Its hull was scarred and pitted from 1,000 battles, each mark representing a conquered world or a defeated fleet. 10 seconds. Tang Ho gripped his command chair and spoke to his crew one last time. It's been an honor serving with all of you. Whatever happens next, the galaxy will know that humans fought back. 5 seconds. Missiles away. Kim Tae shouted. The Iron Will's remaining missiles streaked toward the Void Render's hull at point-blank range. Without shields to stop them, they punched deep into the enemy ship's armor before exploding. Secondary explosions bloomed along the massive vessel's hull as ammunition storage and fuel lines detonated. Impact! The Iron Will struck the Void Render with the force of a meteor. The smaller ship's reinforced nose punched through layers of armor like a bullet through paper. For a split second, the human frigate hung halfway inside the enemy dreadnought. Her crew still alive and fighting. Then Engineer Choi Min triggered the fusion reactor overload. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. The Iron Will and everything inside her vaporized instantly, but the massive release of energy tore through the Void Render's hull like a bomb going off inside a building. Entire sections of the great ship buckled and collapsed. Atmosphere vented into space through wounds that stretched for kilometers. From his command throne deep inside the dying ship, War Master Thecalon felt the Void Render shudder as internal explosions ripped through her superstructure. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red light as damage reports flooded in from all sections. Status report, he roared over the noise of alarms. Main reactor is offline, his second-in-command reported. We've lost power to weapons and shields. Hull breaches on decks 40 through 60. We're venting atmosphere from multiple sections. Thecalon stared at the tactical display in disbelief. One small human ship had done what entire fleets had failed to accomplish. It had damaged the Void Render. Not destroyed it, but hurt it badly enough to take it out of the fight. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving transmissions from across human space. The story of this battle is spreading. Human ships are beginning to rally. On the screen, Thecalon could see new contacts appearing at the edge of the system. Human vessels were converging on their position, cargo ships, passenger liners, even mining platforms armed with improvised weapons. They were coming to continue the fight that the Iron Will had started. How many ships? Thecalon asked. Dozens. Sir, and more arriving every minute? The War Master studied the display, his tactical mind analyzing the situation. His fleet was still superior in numbers and firepower, but the humans had gained something far more dangerous than better weapons. They had gained hope. The human captain was right, he said quietly. Their sacrifice has inspired others. As he watched, the first of the arriving human ships opened fire on his fleet. They were outgunned and outmatched, but they fought with the same desperate courage that the Iron Will had shown. More ships appeared, and then more, until space was filled with the flash of weapons and the glow of explosions. The Valkyrie had expected an easy victory and a quick surrender. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that refused to quit, an enemy that grew stronger with each defeat, an enemy that would rather die fighting than live in chains. For the first time in his long career of conquest, War Master Thecalon began to wonder if the Valkyrie Dominion had finally met its match. The humans had learned something in this battle that would change everything. They had learned that the Valkyrie could be hurt. And across human space. On 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 ships, people were learning the same lesson. The war was far from over, but it was no longer hopeless. The Iron Will was gone, but her spirit lived on in every human who chose to fight rather than surrender. The galaxy would never be the same. Commander Beijin stood on the bridge of the cargo hauler Persistence, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. 3 hours had passed since the Iron Will sacrifice, and human ships were still arriving in the battle zone. What had started as a desperate last stand by one small frigate had become something much larger. Status report, he ordered. Lieutenant Song-mi looked up from her console. The young officer had been serving on merchant vessels before the war started, but she had learned to fight as well as any military veteran. 63 ships in our makeshift fleet, sir. We've got everything from mining barges to luxury yachts. Most of them are armed with whatever weapons they could find, Beijing nodded. He had been Admiral Park Yuna's second-in-command before her death, and now he found himself leading a collection of civilian volunteers and military survivors who had refused to retreat. They shouldn't have been able to challenge a Valkyrie fleet, but somehow they were holding their own. What's the status of the enemy flagship? The Void Render is still dead in space, sir. Our long-range sensors show massive damage from the iron. Will's ramming attack. They're venting atmosphere and their main weapons are offline. On the main screen, the battle continued to rage. The Valkyrie fleet was still larger and more powerful, but something had changed. Their perfect formations were breaking down as human ships darted between them like angry hornets. The aliens were used to fighting organized fleets with predictable tactics, not this chaotic swarm of desperate fighters. Sir, Communications Officer Park Jin reported, I'm getting reports from across the system. The story of Captain Kang Ho's sacrifice is spreading through the communication networks. More ships are coming. How many more? Hard to say, but our sensors are picking up at least 100 new contacts. They're coming from every direction. Beijing felt a chill run down his spine. 100 ships might not sound like much compared to the Valkyrie fleet, but these weren't just any ships. These were humans who had heard about the iron, Will's last stand, and decided they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't fight back. Sir, said Dr. Hansol from the science station, I've been analyzing the data from the Iron Will's final battle. Something interesting happened when they rammed the Void Render. Dr. Hansol was the ship's civilian scientist, recruited to help them understand Valkyrie technology. She was young and brilliant, with a mind that could see patterns others missed. What did you find? The explosion from their fusion reactor didn't just damage the enemy ship. It sent out a pulse of energy that interfered with Valkyrie shield technology across their entire fleet. Look at these readings. The main screen showed sensor data from the battle. As Dr. Hansol highlighted different parts of the information, a pattern became clear. Every Valkyrie ship in the area had experienced shield fluctuations at the moment of the Iron Will's sacrifice. Their shields are vulnerable to high-energy fusion explosions, Dr. Hansol continued. If we could replicate that effect, we could level the playing field, Beijing finished. Can we do it? Theoretically, yes. We'd need to overload several fusion reactors simultaneously and detonate them at specific points around the enemy fleet. It would be a suicide mission for the crews involved, but it might disable their shields long enough for our other ships to attack. Beijing considered the proposal. He was asking people to die, just as Captain Kang Ho had asked his crew to die. The difference was that this time, their sacrifice might actually win the battle. I'll put it to a vote, he decided. Anyone who volunteers for this mission knows they won't be coming back. The response surprised even him. Within minutes, 12 ship captains had volunteered for the suicide mission. They came from all walks of life: a cargo ship captain named Kim Wei, a pleasure yacht owner called Li Na, even the captain of a garbage scow who went by the nickname Scrap. All of them had heard about the Iron Will's sacrifice and wanted to honor it with their own. This is Captain Kim Wei of the freighter Lucky Strike, came the transmission. My ship's seen better days, but she's got a big fusion reactor and a crew that's tired of running. We'll take the lead position. More voices joined in as the volunteer ships reported their readiness. These people had families and futures waiting for them, but they were willing to give up everything for the chance to strike back at humanity's oppressors. All volunteer ships, this is Commander Beijing, he broadcast on the open channel. What you're about to do will be remembered for as long as humans exist. You're not just fighting for yourselves, you're fighting for every person who has ever dreamed of freedom. As the volunteer ships moved into position, something unexpected happened. The Valkyrie fleet began to change its formation. Instead of maintaining their aggressive attack posture, they started pulling back toward the crippled Void Render. Sir, Lieutenant Song Mi reported, the enemy is retreating to defensive positions around their flagship. Why would they do that? Bei-jin wondered aloud. Dr. Han Sol had the answer. They're afraid. For the first time in this war, they're facing an enemy that won't surrender. They don't know how to deal with opponents who are willing to die rather than give up. She was right. The Valkyrie had conquered dozens of species, but they had never faced anything like humans. Other races fought for territory or resources or survival. Humans fought for ideas, for principles, for the right to live free. They couldn't be bargained with or intimidated because they cared about something more than their own lives. All ships. Begin the attack, the Bei-jin ordered. The volunteer ships accelerated toward the Valkyrie fleet, their fusion reactors already overloading. Behind them, the rest of the human force followed, ready to exploit whatever opportunity the sacrifice would create. Kim Wei's freighter, Lucky Strike, was the first to reach the enemy line. The old cargo ship had been built to haul grain between colonies, but she died like a warship. The explosion when her reactor overloaded lit up space like a miniature sun, and the electromagnetic pulse that followed crashed through the nearest Valkyrie vessels like a tidal wave, one by one. The other volunteer ships followed Lucky Strike into death and glory. Each explosion weakened the enemy's defenses a little more. By the time the last suicide ship detonated, the entire Valkyrie fleet was flying blind, their shields down and their sensors scrambled. Now! Bei-jin shouted. All ships, attack! The human fleet charged into the confused enemy formation like wolves attacking a wounded bear. Mining lasers sliced through unprotected Valkyrie hulls. Improvised missiles found their targets among ships that couldn't defend themselves. For the first time in the war, human weapons were destroying enemy vessels faster than they could be. Replaced on the bridge of the dying Void Render, Warmaster Thekalon watched his fleet being torn apart by an enemy he had underestimated. His communications officer was barely holding back panic as damage reports flooded in. Sir, we've lost 12 destroyers and 4 cruisers. Our remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. Thekalon stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what had gone wrong. 3 hours ago, he had been commanding the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Now, he was watching it fall apart under the attacks of cargo ships and pleasure yachts crewed by beings who seemed to have no fear of death. Sir, his second-in-command prompted. Signal the fleet, Thekalon said. Finally, begin withdrawal to the edge of the system. We need time to regroup and understand what we're facing. As the Valkyrie fleet began its retreat, a cheer went up from every human ship in the battle zone. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the enemy that had crushed every other fleet in the galaxy, but Commander Bei-jin wasn't celebrating yet. He knew this was just the beginning. The Valkyrie would be back with more ships and better tactics. The war was far from over, however, something fundamental had changed. Humans had learned they could hurt their enemies. More importantly, they had learned that courage and sacrifice could inspire others to fight when all seemed lost. Across human space, the story of the Iron Will's last stand was spreading like wildfire. On every world, in every colony, people were hearing about Captain Kang Ho and his crew's refusal to surrender. They were learning that sometimes the best way to win was to refuse to lose. The galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the Battle of Iron Will, as historians were already calling it, the war had changed completely. Captain Song-mi stood on the bridge of her newly commissioned warship, the defiant spirit watching sensor readings that would have been impossible just days earlier. Ma'am, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park Woo, we've got confirmation. The Valkyrie evacuation of the Centauri system is complete. They've abandoned 3 major military bases and pulled back to the outer rim. Song-mi nodded, still finding it hard to believe. The same aliens who had seemed unstoppable 2 weeks ago were now retreating across human space, abandoning positions they had held for months. The Iron Will sacrifice had started something that no one could have predicted. Any word from the other task forces? She asked. Communications Officer Lee Jun looked up from his console. Task Force Kang Ho has successfully liberated the mining colonies in the Vega system. Task Force Iron reports that Valkyrie forces have evacuated the asteroid belt without a fight. It's the same story everywhere. They're pulling back to defensive positions. Song Mi walked to the main display, which showed a tactical map of known space. Red markers indicated Valkyrie positions, while blue showed human-controlled areas. Just 2 weeks ago, the map had been almost entirely red. Now, patches of blue were spreading like an infection across the galaxy. "They're afraid," said Dr. Yun-Ki from the science station. The young scientist had joined the ship specifically to study Valkyrie behavior patterns. "Our analysis of their retreat patterns shows classic signs of an army that has lost confidence in its ability to win." "But why?" asked Chief Engineer Nam Ho, looking up from his console. "They still outnumber us 10 to 1. Their technology is still superior to ours. What changed?" Dr. Yun-Ki brought up a series of communication intercepts on the secondary screen. "We've been monitoring Valkyrie military transmissions. The story of the Iron Will's attack has spread through their entire fleet. Their soldiers are calling us as the species that refuses to die and the ones who fight without fear." Song Ni studied the translations of alien communications. Words like unpredictable and dangerous appeared over and over again in Valkyrie reports about human tactics. More interesting were the references to honor deaths and glory sacrifices, concepts that the alien military seemed to find both fascinating and disturbing. "Sir," Li Jun interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Bei Jin. Put him through." The image of Commander Bei Jin appeared on screen. In the 2 weeks since the Battle of Iron Will, he had been promoted to Admiral and put in charge of all human resistance forces. The man looked tired but determined, with the bearing of someone who had seen impossible victories and knew more battles lay ahead. "Captain Song Mi, congratulations on the liberation of Centauri. Your task force performed admirably." "Thank you, sir." The Valkyrie didn't put up much of a fight. They seemed more interested in retreating than fighting. "That's what I'm calling about. We've received intelligence that suggests the Valkyrie are planning something big. Our spies in the outer systems report massive fleet movements toward the Rigel sector." Song Mi felt a chill. The Rigel sector was home to Earth and the core human colonies. If the Valkyrie were massing forces there, it could only mean one thing. "They're planning a final offensive," she said. "That's our assessment. They want to end this war before we get any stronger. Intelligence estimates suggest they're gathering over 1,000 ships for an assault on Earth itself." The bridge went quiet. 1,000 Valkyrie ships was more firepower than humanity had ever faced in one place. Even with their recent victories, the human fleet couldn't match those numbers. "What are our orders, sir?" Song Mi asked. "Recall all task forces to the Sol system. We're going to make our stand at Earth. If we can defeat them there, in front of the whole galaxy, it might convince other species to join our rebellion. And if we lose?" Admiral Bei Jin was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll lose fighting for our home, just like Captain Kang Ho would have wanted." After the transmission ended, Song Mi stood looking at the tactical display for a long time. Her crew worked quietly around her, preparing the ship for the journey to Earth. They all understood what was coming, the final battle between humanity and the Valkyrie. "Dominion, Captain," Dr. Yun-Ki said softly. "There's something else you should know. We've been monitoring communications from other species in the galaxy. The story of human resistance is spreading beyond our space." "What do you mean?" 3 species have declared independence from Valkyrie rule in the past week. The Altarians, the Sentinus, and the Vegan Collective have all begun armed uprisings. They're using human tactics, small ships, suicide attacks, refusal to surrender. Song Mi felt a spark of hope. If other species were joining the fight, humanity wouldn't be facing the Valkyrie alone. "There's more," Dr. Yun-Ki continued. "We've received secret communications from resistance groups on a dozen worlds. They're asking for human advisors, human weapons, human leadership. The galaxy is starting to believe that the Valkyrie can be defeated. All because one ship refused to surrender," Song Mi mused, over the next few days as the defiant spirit raced toward Earth. More reports came in from across the galaxy. The rebellion that had started with the Iron Will's sacrifice was spreading like wildfire. Species that had been enslaved for years were suddenly finding the courage to fight back. On Kepler 442b, a mining world that had been under Valkyrie control, for 5 years, workers had seized the orbital shipyards and were building their own fleet. On Volf 359, the native population had driven out their alien occupiers using tactics copied from human resistance manuals. Even in the heart of Valkyrie space, there were reports of uprisings and sabotage. "It's remarkable," Dr. Yun Ki observed as they studied the intelligence reports. Captain Kang Ho and his crew didn't just save humanity, they saved the entire galaxy. Their sacrifice proved that the Valkyrie weren't invincible. Chief Engineer Nam Ho looked up from his work. "Do you think they knew? When they made their final attack, do you think they understood what it would lead to?" Song Mi considered the question. She had read every report about the Iron Will's last battle, studied every piece of communication from that day. Captain Kang Ho had been a good officer and a brave man, but he had also been practical. He had to have known that one ship couldn't win the war. "I think they knew they couldn't win," she said finally. "But I also think they knew they couldn't lose. Not really. Because ideas don't die when people die. The idea of freedom, the idea that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost, those ideas are immortal." As the defiant spirit approached the Sol system, Song Mi could see the massive human fleet gathering around Earth. Hundreds of ships from across human space were converging for the final battle. Some were military vessels, but many were civilian. Ships that had been armed for war. They looked small and fragile compared to what was coming, but Song Mi wasn't worried about the size of their fleet anymore. She had learned something important in the past 2 weeks. Numbers didn't matter as much as spirit. The Valkyrie might have more ships, but humans had something more powerful. The willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. "Captain Lee," June reported, "we're receiving transmission from Earth Command. We're being assigned to Battle Group 7 under the command of Admiral Park Yuna." Song Mi smiled. Admiral Park Yuna had been presumed dead when her flagship was destroyed 2 weeks ago, but she had survived in an escape pod and was now leading the defense of Earth. The woman who had ordered the retreat was now preparing for humanity's greatest battle. "Signal Admiral Park that the defiant spirit is ready for orders," Song Mi commanded. "Tell her we're honored to fight beside the Iron Will's legacy." As her ship took its position in the human battle line, Song Mi thought about Captain Kang Ho and his crew. They had died believing their sacrifice might inspire others to keep fighting. They had been right beyond their wildest dreams. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans refused to surrender. The final battle began at dawn on Earth's eastern hemisphere. Admiral Park Yuna stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Remembrance, watching as 1,000 Valkyrie ships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. The enemy fleet was so large it blocked out the stars behind it. "All stations report ready," announced her tactical officer, Commander Kim Do. The young man had lost his previous ship in the early battles of the war, but he had learned to fight with the desperate skill that all human officers now possessed. "Enemy fleet composition?" Park Yuna asked. 200 dreadnoughts, including 5 planet killers, 400 heavy cruisers, 300 destroyers, and about 100 support vessels. They're led by the new Valkyrie flagship, the Dominions. Wrath. Park Yuna studied the tactical display. After the damage to the Void Render, Warmaster Thecalon had transferred his command to an even larger vessel. The Dominion's Wrath was 15 kilometers long and mounted enough weapons to sterilize a planet's surface in minutes. Our forces? 600 ships total, but most are converted civilian vessels. We have 50 proper warships, including the survivors from the original fleet. The rest are cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mining ships that have been armed. For battle, it should have been hopeless. The Valkyrie still had superior numbers, better weapons, and stronger armor. But Park Yuna felt something she hadn't felt since the war began: confidence. Her fleet might be smaller, but it was filled with people who had learned how to fight without fear. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Shin Yu, "we're receiving signals from across the galaxy. 23 species have declared their support for the human rebellion. The Altarians are attacking Valkyrie supply lines in Sector 7. The Vegan Collective has captured 3 enemy worlds in the past week. And the Sentinels? They've provided us with intelligence about Valkyrie shield frequencies. Apparently, they've been studying the data from the Iron Will's final attack. Park Yuna smiled. The galaxy had been watching the human rebellion with growing interest, and now that interest was turning into active support, species that had been conquered years ago were suddenly finding the courage to fight back. Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship, Shin Yu announced. Put it through. War Master Thecalon's image appeared on the main screen. The alien commander looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, his harsh features marked by what might have been fatigue or frustration. Behind him, the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath buzzed with activity as his crew prepared for battle. Admiral Park Yuna, Thecalon said, his voice as gravelly as ever. I offer you one final chance to surrender. Your species has fought bravely, but this ends today. Surrender now, and I will allow your people to live as honored servants of the Dominion. Honored servants? Park Yuna replied. You mean slaves. I mean survivors. Look at my fleet, Admiral. I have brought enough firepower to glass your homeworld. Your brave resistance has impressed the Dominion, but it cannot overcome simple mathematics. Park Yuna walked closer to the screen, looking directly into the alien's black eyes. War Master, you've been fighting us for 2 weeks now. Have you learned nothing about humans in that time? I have learned that you are stubborn to the point of self-destruction. Then you've learned nothing. At all, we're not fighting because we're stubborn. We're fighting because some things are worth dying for. Freedom is worth dying for. The right to live as we choose is worth dying for. And the chance to inspire others to fight for those same rights is worth dying for. Thecalon was quiet for a moment, studying the human admiral. Your Captain Kang Ho said something similar before he died. Do you all share this obsession with meaningless gestures? There's nothing meaningless about it? That one ship's refusal to surrender has sparked rebellions across the galaxy. Your empire is crumbling, War Master, and it all started with 47. Humans who chose death over slavery, perhaps. But your 47 heroes are dead, and my fleet will ensure that their sacrifice was wasted. This is your last chance, Admiral. Park Yuna straightened her shoulders and spoke in a voice that carried across the bridge and beyond. War Master Thecalon, this is Admiral Park Yuna of the Human Defense Fleet. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We are human and we choose to fight. The transmission ended and the bridge erupted in cheers. Those words, almost identical to the Iron Will's final message, had become a rallying cry for the entire rebellion. Across the human fleet, crews prepared for battle with the calm determination of people who knew they were fighting for everything that mattered. All ships, Park Yuna announced on the fleet frequency. This is Admiral Park. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every free being in the galaxy. The Valkyrie expect us to break like every other fleet they've faced. They expect us to run when the fighting gets hard. They're about to learn that humans don't know how to quit. The Valkyrie fleet began its advance, moving in the same perfect formations that had crushed every other opponent. Their massive ships bristled with weapons that could destroy cities, powered by reactors that burned hotter than suns. They moved with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. But something was different this time. As the human fleet moved to meet them, it didn't maintain neat formations or follow predictable tactics. Instead, it scattered like a flock of birds, with individual ships and small groups diving toward the enemy from every direction. What are they doing? Thecalon asked his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. Their formation appears chaotic, but our computer models can't predict their attack patterns. That was exactly the point. Human tactics had evolved since the Iron Will's sacrifice. Instead of trying to match Valkyrie firepower directly, they had learned to use speed, unpredictability, and sheer audacity to level the playing field. Captain Song Mi, commanding the Defiant Spirit as part of Battle Group 7, dove her ship between 2 Valkyrie dreadnoughts before either could react. Her weapons, enhanced with technology provided by allied species, tore through enemy armor that should have been impenetrable. Direct hit on their reactor core, her tactical officer reported. The dreadnought is breaking apart. All across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as human ships exploited the lessons learned from weeks of desperate fighting. They had discovered that Valkyrie ships, for all their power, were designed to fight predictable enemies against opponents who threw themselves into impossible attacks with complete disregard for their own safety. The aliens struggled to respond. Dr. Han Sol, monitoring the battle from the science vessel Discovery, watched the tactical display with amazement. "It's working," she breathed. "The fusion pulse technique, the shield disruption patterns, the targeting data from our allies, it's all working." Her captain, an old merchant marine named Choi Seung, nodded grimly. "Those kids on the Iron Will didn't die for nothing. They gave us the key to beating these monsters." As the battle raged, more good news came in from across the galaxy. The Altarian fleet had destroyed a major Valkyrie supply depot. The Sentinels had captured the alien fortress world of Zarian Prime. On a dozen worlds, enslaved populations were rising up against their oppressors. The rebellion that had started with one ship's refusal to surrender was becoming a galaxy-wide revolution. And at the center of it all, above the blue-green world where humanity had taken its first steps toward the stars, the final battle for freedom was reaching its climax. Warmaster Thecalon watched his perfect fleet being torn apart by an enemy that refused to follow any rules of warfare. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he began to understand that he might lose. The humans had taught the galaxy something dangerous, that courage was contagious, that sacrifice could inspire, and that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. The war was about to end, but not the way anyone had expected. The battle above Earth reached its turning point when the converted mining ship, Hammer of Freedom, rammed the Valkyrie dreadnought Terror's edge. The explosion lit up space like a second sun, and the shockwave from the mining ship's overloaded reactor cascaded through the enemy formation, disrupting shields and sensors across dozens of vessels. Admiral Park Yuna watched from the bridge of the Remembrance as her fleet pressed their advantage. "All ships, concentrate fire on the disrupted vessels. Don't give them time to recover." The human fleet swarmed over the damaged Valkyrie ships like wolves bringing down a wounded giant. Weapons that had barely scratched enemy armor now punched through weakened shields and hull plating. Ship after ship fell to the desperate assault. "Admiral," reported Commander Kim Du, "we're getting reports from the outer squadrons. The enemy is starting to break formation. Some of their ships are actually retreating." Park Yuna felt a surge of hope. Valkyrie ships never retreated from battle. It went against everything their military culture stood for. If they were pulling back now, it meant their confidence was finally broken. On the bridge of the Dominion's wrath, Warmaster Thecalon stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. His fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours ago, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that should have been swept aside easily. More than a third of his ships were already dead or dying, and the humans showed no signs of slowing their attack. "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, "perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal. We can regroup and return with a larger force." Thecalon's black eyes flashed with anger. "The Valkyrie Dominion does not retreat. We finish this now." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the human homeworld. Prepare the planet-killer weapons." "Sir." "That would destroy the entire biosphere. Millions of civilians would die." "Good, let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Dominion." But as the massive weapons began to charge, something unexpected happened. The human fleet, instead of pulling back to defend their homeworld, accelerated directly toward the Dominion's wrath. Led by Admiral Park's flagship, dozens of ships formed a spearhead aimed straight at the enemy command vessel. "They're attacking us directly." Thecalon's tactical officer shouted, "All ships, protect the flagship." It was too late. The human fleet had learned too much from Captain Kong Ho's sacrifice to be stopped by conventional tactics. They came in low and fast, weaving between the larger Valkyrie vessels, using the enemy's own ships as cover from the planet-killer weapons. Captain Song Mi's defiant spirit was part of the spearhead assault. "All weapons, target their command." "Center," she ordered. "Don't let them fire on Earth." The small human ships crashed against the Dominion's wrath like waves against a cliff. One by one, they were destroyed by the massive ship's defensive weapons, but not before inflicting terrible damage. Hull breaches opened along the enemy flagship's sides, venting atmosphere and crew into space. "Direct hit on their main reactor," reported Song Mi's tactical officer. "They're losing power." But the defiant spirit had taken too much damage to survive much longer. Her hull was breached in multiple places, her engines were failing, and half her crew was dead or wounded. Song Mi looked around her dying bridge and made the same choice that Captain Kang Ho had made weeks earlier. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered, "except the bridge crew. We're going to ram them." "Captain," her engineer protested. "The escape pods will get you to safety. This is my choice." Song Mi turned to face her remaining crew. "Anyone who wants to leave can go now. I won't order you to stay." Nobody moved. Like the crew of the Iron Will before them, they had chosen to follow their captain into death rather than abandon the fight. The defiant spirit accelerated toward the Dominion's Wrath's bridge, her reactor already overloading. Around her, other human ships made the same desperate choice. The freighter New Hope, the passenger liner Star of Peace, the converted yacht Lucky 7, all of them aimed for vital points on the enemy flagship, War Master. Vek'Alan watched them come with something approaching respect. These humans fought like no enemy he had ever faced. They didn't retreat when outnumbered, they didn't surrender when defeated, and they didn't hesitate to die for their beliefs. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender offers from across our fleet. The humans have destroyed or disabled over half our ships." "Impossible. Valkyrie forces do not surrender." "Sir, with respect, they do when they're facing an enemy that refuses to lose." The first of the ramming ships struck the Dominion's Wrath amidships, the explosion tearing through multiple decks. Then the defiant spirit hit the bridge section, Song Mi's final words echoing across all frequencies. "For the Iron Will. For freedom." The combined explosions crippled the massive flagship, sending it spinning helplessly through space. Emergency. Lights bathed the bridge in red as damage reports flooded in from every section. "Main reactor is failing," Vek'Alan's engineer reported. "We have maybe 10 minutes before containment fails completely." Vek'Alan looked at the tactical display one. Last time, his grand fleet was in ruins, destroyed by an enemy that had learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that courage was more powerful than superior firepower. The human rebellion had spread across the galaxy, and even if he somehow won this battle, the war was already lost. "Open a channel to the human fleet," he ordered. Admiral Park Yuna's image appeared on the screen. Behind her, the bridge of the Remembrance showed signs of battle damage, but her eyes held the calm certainty of someone who knew victory was within reach. "Admiral," Vek'Alan said formally, "I offer the surrender of all Valkyrie forces in this system." Park Yuna studied the alien commander for a long moment. "What terms?" "Complete withdrawal from human space. Recognition of your independence? We will not return." "And the other species your empire has enslaved?" Vek'Alan closed his eyes. He was not just surrendering this battle, he was acknowledging the end of everything the Valkyrie Dominion had built. They are free to choose their own path. The transmission ended, and across the human fleet, cheers erupted from every ship. The impossible had happened. Humanity had won. Not just survived, but actually defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy. In the days that followed, the news spread across known space faster than light itself. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had seemed unstoppable just weeks earlier, was crumbling as world after world declared independence. Species that had been enslaved for generations were suddenly free. Inspired by the example of 47 humans who had refused to surrender, Admiral Park Yuna stood in the memorial garden that had been built on Luna Base. reading the names engraved on the wall. At the top, in letters of gold, were the names of Captain Kong Ho and the crew of the UES Iron Will. Below them were hundreds of other names, all the people who had chosen to fight rather than surrender, to die rather than live, as slaves. "Do you think they knew?" asked Dr. Han Sol, who had come to pay her respects. "When Captain Kang Ho made his choice, do you think he knew it would lead to all this?" Park Yuna considered the question, looking out at the blue marble of Earth hanging in the black sky. "I think he knew that some choices are bigger than the people who make them. He chose to fight because it was right, not because he thought it would work. But sometimes doing the right thing is enough to change everything." She touched the nameplate beneath Captain Kong Ho's name, which bore a simple inscription. They broke every fleet until one human ship refused to surrender. The galaxy had learned an important lesson, that freedom was worth any price, that courage could overcome any odds, and that sometimes the greatest victories came from refusing to accept defeat. The Iron Will was gone, but her spirit lived on in every being who chose to fight for liberty rather than accept oppression. Humanity had not just saved itself, it had saved the entire galaxy. And it all started with one ship's refusal to give? The age of the Valkyrie Dominion was over. The age of freedom had begun.